Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us today. My name is Patricia, and I'm a bookseller and assistant director of events here at Malaprop's Bookstore and Cafe. This is another and one of our many Poet Quartet events. We're delighted to have our live audience here. Hello, live audience. Live audience. Come on now, what's wrong with feeling? I know it was hot out there, but it's nice and at least a little cooler in here. Do this for the poets. Live audience is here as well. That's the spirit. That's the spirit. And then, of course, I know we've got a virtual audience out there who's saying loud virtual huzzahs and hoorays and woody woots and you go and all that. So we thank you to a virtual audience for being here today. I'm going to introduce all four of the poets, tell you just a little bit about each of them and what they've been doing and what they're reading from. And I have had their permission to reduce the amount of time I'm reading because actually you want to hear them read. So I will keep it short. Let me tell you a little bit about our poets in order of appearance this afternoon. Right, starting with James Davis May. James is going to be reading today from his second poetry collection, Unusually Grand Ideas, which was published this year by Louisiana State University Press. He's also the author of the poetry collection, Unquiet Things, and is a 2021 National Endowment for the Arts Fellow in Creative Writing. Hails from Pittsburgh and now lives in Macon, Georgia, where he directs the creative writing program at Mercer University. To find out more about James Davis May, you can go to his website, jamesdavismay.com. So James will be first. Second will be Sara Moore Wagner. Sara is the author of the poetry collection, Hillbilly Madonna, which you will be reading from today. Hillbilly Madonna is the 2022 Driftwood Press Prize winner, and Sara is a 2021 National Poetry Series finalist and the recipient of a 2019 Sustainable Arts Foundation Award. Her poetry has appeared in many journals and anthologies. Pardon my page flip. Sara lives in Westchester, Ohio. Welcome from Ohio, Sara. With her husband, John, and children, Cohen, Daisy, and Vivian. For more information about Sara, you can visit saramorewagner.com. Third on the list, James Dickson, who teaches English and creative writing at Germantown High School in Mississippi. Welcome from Mississippi. James is an MFA graduate from the Bennington Writing Seminars and the recipient of the Mississippi Arts Commission Fellowships. He also has poems and book reviews and essays that have appeared in Ruminate, Hospital Drive, Spillway, Slant, and Poetry Quarterly, and of course, McSweeney's. James will be reading today from Some Sweet Vandal, which is his first poetry collection and was published by Kelsay Books in May. James lives in Jackson with his wife, their sons, and a small menagerie of animals. We love a menagerie of animals. That's fantastic. No information provided about how to reach him on social media. Speak with him if you want to know further info. Okay, and finally, our fourth poet today, Philip Belcher, is the Vice President of Programs for the Community Foundation of Western North Carolina in Asheville, and is the author of The Flies and Their Lovely Names. That won the South Carolina Poetry Initiative Chapbook Prize. Philip is going to read from Gentle Slaughter, and Philip has also served as an advisor, advisory and contributing editor for Shenandoah. You can learn more about Philip at philipbelcher.net. It's my pleasure to start the afternoon off with James.
Very much. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, James, and my fellow poets. we were being very, very kind when we were talking about the order, and I'm fine with reading first, but then I realized my book is all about depression, and I'm like, I'm now wondering, should Eeyore have started the, but I know we all take on serious subjects, but so I am though going to try to move from maybe sort of the darker poems to the lighter poems. I told Sara I would pump the crowd up for it, so we'll see if that works. But I'm going to open with a poem called Red in Tooth and Claw. Even on the night my friend died, after a long illness, I won't use the word battle, but the cancer was gone, and then it came back like some slasher film killer. Even on that night, even on that night, the feral cat, the one that's white and fluffy and sometimes affectionate, still crossed our driveway quietly from our neighbor's pines to our rhododendrons. Even on that night, she would look for some rodent or bird to terrorize and mangle and maybe fully kill. And I, drinking and grieving on our deck, was appalled by the world and its gross refusal to stop being the world. And then embarrassed, not just by my own naivety, though there's plenty of that, but by my innate human sickness that believes we matter, that someone is listening, that civility isn't just something we imagined and don't really follow anyway. That night, I wanted everything to be better than it is. So I went to the fridge, got out the milk, and poured it into a little bowl, which I left on the porch and found empty the next morning. So as I said, this first section is sort of about grief, and then it moves to sort of looking at a year-long depressive episode. And I didn't really know what was going on at the time. I just knew I didn't feel well. And then at some moment I thought, maybe it's depression. And when you have if you have some sort of ailment, what's the first thing you do? Like, you think, right? Yeah, exactly. I got on Google. And so I did a Google search of depression. And so this poem's sort of about seeing if, my experience sort of lines up with that one. So this is image search, depression. A woman with her stiffened hand to her head, an expression that could be migraine, or if this were a comedy, which it isn't, the mock suffering that follows a bad pun. A teenager sitting in the doorway, back against the frame, knees cushioning the arms that cradle the head so that her body forms a half-melted W. A man shouting at his wife, arms raised as if signaling a touchdown. None of these corresponded to the way I felt at 4 a.m., running the trail in the pitch black park, to how I needed a darkness I'd probably survive to escape the one I knew I wouldn't. And then, does anyone speak French here? A little bit, okay, don't, I'm sorry. This next poem is about my family. It's sort of about getting a little bit better, but also that idea that you can be sort of surrounded by love and beauty, and the depression can still kind of find you. And so we were in Brittany, France, in a town called Saint-Maur-des-Ans. And it's one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. You can see Mount Saint Michel across the bay, and still it's there. And so this poem's about that experience. So this is Depression in Saint-Maur-des-Ans. The donkey my daughter loves cannot reach the flowers that grow in the film of soil the ocean breeze has lifted to the roof of the barn. We don't know what they're called and speak too little of the language to ask the farmhand their name, though we can tell they're delicious by the way the donkey cocks its head to 2 o'clock toward the roof and strains its prehensile lips to almost reach them. An effort that looks like remembering a word you can almost recall, how it nearly touches the voice. It's on the tip of my tongue, we say. And I don't know what to say to myself or the man I become inside those days and nights of hurt I cannot argue my way out of. I know it won't be enough to say, remember the orchard over there, its plums and cherries and apples just forming from the blooms. Not enough to remember the tides we hear beyond the meadow, how they leave the beach cracked like ancient porcelain. Not enough to repeat the Auden lines I muttered to myself last night at the restaurant when I felt the depression coming on, eerie as a suspicion of being watched. The lights must never go out, I said. The music must always play. And it almost worked. The intoxication of asking for and receiving the tray of oysters gleaming like an ornate clock. Then the bouquet of mussels and the baked sea bream, symmetrical as a wrapped Christmas gift. but I've learned that you can love pleasure and still want to die while absolutely not wanting to die. A situation that requires, if nothing else, some patience. The precise gentleness the donkey grants my daughter's hand as she offers the wanted flowers to the mouth that craves and destroys them. This is called about to move towards something lighter, but not really in this one. This is called Fish Rain. If you've ever seen those stories where it's raining fish in some town, that's sort of about this phenomenon, fish rain. It's rare, but it happens. A waterspout forms near land and raptures the fish to the sky. We're not quite sure what happens next. Well, we know that many die, that some are shredded by the winds, that some are frozen into chunks of ice, and that some survive, even after the cyclone stops, and they exist up there a while. Maybe they're pummeled, but supported by the currents and the clouds, the way you keep a tennis ball in the air with a single racket, kept up until they aren't and fall, and even then some survive to drown on land. What must it be like to die after that ascension? Before life was so much hunger and short-lived satisfaction, but mostly buoyancy, without knowing that word or any word. Yes, they're stunned, but surely they know or sense something is ending. One eye focused on the ground, the other on the lost sky, and the water an absence, a memory they can't remember, while that human sound of wonder starts up when they're found and can't, I imagine, help. Initially, I had in that poem that instead of saying they're stunned, they're dumb. And the poet Robert Haas was looking at a draft and he said, well, they're pretty smart at being fish. And so I thought, well, maybe I'm being not nice to fish there. So tomorrow is my 13th anniversary. 13, yeah, so thank you. My wife is right here. And so we're gonna start getting a little happier here. This is called The Snake in the Living Room. And this is for my wife. Had it been a spider or a rat or the worm I had hoped it was, I could have handled it, killed it or angled it into the moonlight outside the sliding glass doors. But once I saw the signature slither and the tongue flickering like horror film lightning, I knew I needed my wife, though she was sleeping. Though the snake was small enough for the dustpan, I tried but dropped in one final attempt to overthrow my fear. So Kelsay came from our darkened bedroom and through the hall to our living room, naked, not even wearing her glasses, and pinched the snake. Even the dust it hid in seemed to weigh it down, then took it outside. Yes, I thought of Eve in the story I never believed, though the suffering it's caused is real enough. When Kelsay returned and kissed me and said, "Aren't you glad I found you?" I was and am. It was, after all, the truth, and I still know it. I'm out of book shape, reading shape here. This poem's about, and one for my daughter here. This is called Moonflowers, the flowers that sort of open as the night comes on. Tonight at dusk, we linger by the fence around the garden, watching the wound husks of moonflowers unclench themselves slowly, almost too slow for us to see they're moving. You notice only when you look away and back until the bloom decides, or seems to decide, that teases over and throws its petals backward like a sail in wind. A suddenness about this, as though it screams, almost the way a newborn screams at pain and want and cold. And I still hear that cry and shout across the garden to say another flower is about to break. I go to where my daughter stands, flowers strung along the vine like Christmas lights, one not yet lit. We praise the world by making others see what we see. So now she points and feels what must be pride when the bloom unlocks itself from itself. And then she turns to look at me. And I'll do one more poem. This was actually, though we lived 2 hours away, this was sort of our local bookstore, Malaprop. So we lived in Young Harris Georgia, and not a whole lot of bookstores around there, or great bookstores around there. And when we moved up there from Atlanta, we had this experience of, we didn't want to move up there, but we had to for our careers, but we're up there, and it started going okay. I'd see a deer and I'd write a deer poem. I'd see turkey, I'd write a turkey poem. I'd see a fox poem. And my wife, Kelsay Rathburn, who's a poet, also said, finally, no more critters, no more critter poems. And so I swore off the critter poems. And then this poem kind of happened. Ed Smith. Instead of deer or turkey in the yard, this morning we find Ed Smith, or a man who says he's Ed Smith, elderly, dressed in a khaki jacket and pants. He sits beside me now on our deck while inside my wife calls the sheriff to see if anyone is looking for him. No one is. He knows nothing except the name, not even how he got here or why he would be walking at all just after sunrise. I ask him if he saw the cows in the meadow along the roadside, and he says no, that he didn't come that way, but I know it's the only way he could have come. I ask him if he's married, and he says no, then maybe. And I catch myself manufacturing a sort of condescending pity, condescending in the way that all pity is, thinking of him as a body with no self, a ghost in reverse, an orphan memory of someone else's grandfather now lost and unaware that no one is looking, or no one knows who he is, including himself. In the old stories, the dead forget themselves and walk witless through the underworld like boats adrift and pilotless. And maybe that's why we invented the self or the soul or the spirit, some indelible quiddity that cannot die, because this, to be forgotten by everyone, even our own minds, seemed and is inexcusable, the worst sort of indignity. But maybe the spell will break and the hero will return, however briefly, to talk with the sheriff, who'd otherwise be bored this Sunday in a county where nothing happens except for things like this. Maybe a wife will be found, or a son or a daughter who will laugh when picking him up, the laugh, the acceptance of what cannot be changed. So my wife and I wait for that someone who will know what to do, leaving Ed Smith to sit quietly in our chair without questions, his hand tapping his knee to the rhythm of a song that he's remembered or imagined and isn't there, but seems to be beautiful. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I kind of wish you had ended dark, because Heavenly Madonna is not a light book. So I'm going to take us into my book, which is about rural girlhood and opioids. It's about growing up with parents who come from Appalachia, and the kind of disconnect that I felt being second generation, growing up in the heart of the opioid crisis. So I'll just kind of go through reading that. And then I wanted to end with one poem, which is about North Carolina, which is where my mother lives. She's here, which is from my new book coming out in January, which is about Annie Oakley, and won the latest Blue Links Prize. It's about Annie Oakley and okay. This first poem is called Passing It On. I want to make a child from the one I have lost, to make the base of her noble by some means. Alchemy, the tin girl my father built from junkyard scraps, golden now. I'll pull her out of my pocket, hunched in the woods over a patch of clover. Show her to my daughter, say, aren't I so lucky to keep carrying this with me? Look what I've done for myself, how far I've come. Bury her deep in the creeping water primrose roots that strangle the section of the pond where we search for snails, one after the other, turning them upside down to find a body. It's funny what's lost, how we pull up fistfuls of empty spiral shells, how I put the girl I have made deep into the webbing of organic matter, say live, or at least absorb the heat from the August sky, the tilt of the moon, Neptune to blue your eyes. It never has worked that way. Instead, the metal of the girl I let die leaches into the water supply. We drink it and swell with the grief of being born like this, swell our fingers, our kidneys and toes, grow so large the world won't miss us. How we burst open, vermilion the bank of this quiet space we've tried to sacred. How we are just one little color now, red, better for it. Pre-heroin. My sister and I follow the wood planks of the railroad tracks downtown. We bought a box of crimson manic panic, split two ways, bright red like Tori Amos, shirts tied up, tan bellies. It's a scorcher, the woods mirage, dirt beneath sweat, unrinsed dye rivulets our faces. I say how much this means to me, to be here with her, walking this path alone to the fair, where I won't have any money, but I'll bat my done-up eyelashes at boys until they buy me all the different colors of licorice and enough tickets to ride the Ferris wheel with each one, my back seat sticking to the vinyl. Every boy has wet hands that soak the baby hairs on my thigh. I'm sunburned. It hurts to be touched, but I keep going around and around until night comes and they turn on all those green lights. The rides look like their own city, incandescent. I could be under the sea or on the moon, full of sugar and sun. The breeze just feels so good. My sister doesn't want to ever go home. No one is looking for us yet. It ain't time. We squeeze into a little photo booth with the last of our change. Later, I think that picture was so beautiful, how everything matched then, our sweaty white tees, red faces, splotchy oranging hair. How much power we had that night, just enough to be taken away. Girl as a deer shedding the velvet. I was born with bulbs protruding from my scalp. Soft and pliable, these were my ideas in the strictest sense, new and warm to the touch. My first friend was a small tree, was a railroad spike, was the knife my father took to the base of every single thing I wanted to keep, my body, my childhood. Uprooted, I was uprooted. And when I came of age, all this soft down, this soft tore open, petaled off piece by piece, the red of me so sharp and bright, white bone. Here I am, still peeling, almost hard-headed and ready to hang. Captivity narrative. In the middle of the day, the vultures crown the lake above where you lie on the shoreline, your skirt knit full of sugar ants, the sweet of your skin seeping into the dry clover. You could almost be the old cow our grandfather pushed into the creek bed, released like a bluegill, found later, split open, ribs like fingers. And didn't you know you were this unidentifiable figure, redolent as meat, pickled in your own age, the salt of every meal expelled into droplets? It's the season for it, though, for lying still in a meadow while the clouds and birds festoon the sky so that anyone could just imagine it being made for, made in the image of, where there might be a pasture beyond this, full of honeysuckle, where nothing tracks your slow progress into sleep, nothing scurries over your arms, so small and dark, invisible world now suddenly open as a mouth or palm. Here you are, almost to the molar, ripe. Isn't the land supposed to be here for you, to carry you home as your feet do your body, little by little, plodding and smacking across every stone until doorway or something else? It never matters how you get out, only that you always do. Heroin as women's work. This is my first tool, a needle, chiseled from bone, split-headed as Zeus. I work it back and forth, stitch through the tapestry, draw the thread I brushed, then spun, choke the wool in my fair hands. Watch me weave. I'll make it soft as the rest of the world. I've built it with this sharp little point, cinched together the vast net we dropped into the pond. I feed him even with this quiet movement back and forth. Today, I make something beautiful. Give him little bits, First, my sleep. Take the smooth silk of my eyes, the yellow of my hair. Wine dark work this, toil. Fold my garment around the bones of every window, black out the corners. I want to lose myself in this, to tangle. Bring me a beam to tie these threads, a reed to strike it down, labor light, the blush of these cheeks. Bring me someone to beat like God, or at least to see what I've made of it all. And on my tapestry, I'll show you what I've learned about God. That a man will take you no matter how beautiful you make the world, no matter how beautiful you make it. I should probably read one about my mother here. I know she's here and she would really like that since I'm reading lots of embarrassing things. This one, she used to clean the laundromat when I was little, which is the first line of the poem. I'll just read it and let you see. Forgetting the dust of her. Our mother cleans the laundromat in the evenings for extra money, and I go with her. Watch the tired clothes spin in the big barrel washers, slicked in foam, whopping the glass like little hands. A figure forms in the cotton, another girl, wide-hipped, arms out. She, tied full, sachets around in the drum with a pump, pump, pump. Our mother runs her fingers along the lint trap so fast, splits gray from vent like a pit from a ripe peach, so clean. Mother watches me watching. I get bored, tired of her. I rifle through the old magazines, Ladies' Home Journal or Red Book with the menthol cigarette ads, recipes for brown butter bourbon cake, Maybelline. This is what I should be, cover girl, cherry sweet. I start spinning round and round in one of the faux leather swivel chairs by the window, lose myself in speckled ceiling panels. My body is a round spindle. I can't see or hear her. The dots on the ceiling could be stars or galaxies. The hum of the machines, the drone frequency of the birth of the universe, over and over. I am all foam now, vapor, and it doesn't matter what's on the other side of the glass. Last one I'll read before I read the one from Lady Wingshot is Idle and Lawless. All beautiful, like the side of the hill, dirt and rocks and wildflowers, the mosquitoes low over the rain-filled tire tracks, bees hover, test the sugar in our sweat. With lit cigarettes pressed between our lips, we flick the ash onto the wet side of the earth. We are playing boys, Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. The creek is high. We wade barefoot, jeans rolled up to our inner thigh. We are looking for an image to latch onto, to start us rolling through the rocks. We want to run from something, towards something, to solve the mystery, to get out. I don't want to be Tom, I say, because he was always clowning, and let's be real, I am the smart one. We'll build a raft from all these sticks. We'll leave you with that needle in your arm, like a box of stolen gold. We'll leave you because I can, and making you this story just as a blood oath. I will borrow your lines and flee west. I am always the one to run from it. I am always the one to run. That's when I said my book was about Annie Oakley, but this one really isn't about Annie Oakley. It's about taking vacation to North Carolina and about America, which is really what that book is about. It's about gun violence in America and gun worship and the origins of the American myth. This is called Vacation. At the Carolina coastline, the sea laps up the sand in great gulps. I want to burst on this beach, be put back together, altered as Osiris. Instead, I put my children to bed, sticky with salt, with bits of shell hidden in the follicles of their hair. In the morning, the radios are all playing some tired country song about the ocean, about girls in the ocean. When I stand up to adjust my top, a man stops to say hello. I want to know the right words to heal this country on the edge of this country. Look out, I say. Over that big ocean is another world. Remember all those ships on this very shoreline, cutting through it as birthday cake, not sharp, not craggy, not pumice stone, sweet cake. On the other side of the ocean is not another world. Look out. We are born from both sea and the sand, trace our American heritage to the Appalachian Mountains of Ohio, that great melting pit of loss, which still in the tired hills contain fossils of the sea. We're made from the sea. Make our lineage coastline. There is here and there is there, that great blue, which is somehow warmer than the air above it. A man says the predator fish wait just beyond the sandbar. Hello, fish. Hello, sky. Hello, America, you crowded beach of pushy people covered in sunscreen, taking up more space, claiming a spot early, playing your music so loud it drowns out the sound of the gulls, crying mine, 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 mine. Thank you.
So we've heard about depression and drug use, and now the truly horrible stuff, teaching high school English. If we need to shut down the live stream for this. No, I just finished my 22nd year teaching high school English in Mississippi. Depression and drug use actually sound like a pretty good idea. So that's what a lot of the poems in this book deal with. Also living in Mississippi and its weirdness, and being a dad. I love collective nouns. They're just a lot of fun. So this is school. An unkindness of ravens, a murder of crows. But what collective noun to describe teenagers? A ramble of butterflies, a murmuration of starlings. But how to signify their singular motion, the darting through the tides of adolescence? A passel of possums, a rumba of rattlesnakes, scattering from predators, surrounding prey, fluid and rapid and unified and airless. A gam of whales, a pod of dolphins. But what word to capture this behavior, learned and instinctive, flowing and ringing in their minds? Yeah, teaching has been wonderful and quite burdensome at times. And it's just gotten weirder over the years. One thing I tell my students is when you're learning to write, it's okay to get in conversation with other writers you admire. And so this is part 3 of a 3-part poem where I give some homage to Sylvia Plath. I borrowed a lot of her lines in this particular section, and it's titled "After a Faculty Reading, I Read Plath." After a faculty meeting, I read Plath, which I can highly not recommend reading Plath after a faculty meeting. I will die again. A school shooter simulation, and my boss tells me the medics need a victim. Dying is an art, and mine is scheduled February 11th. After school, other teachers brought in to play students. Shooter man, your Aryan eye peers over the muzzle-capped rifle. I've always been scared of you, yet I stand, run. No, don't shoot, but you do. Your blanks crackle. Each dead child coils down. Over the intercom, our lockdown code melts into a shriek of sirens, shouts. Fake blood floods to a spot on my shirt. Waiting for the paramedics to black tag me, I eat time like air. And the worst part of my career so far has been outliving current and former students. Anyone who has ever been around young people and been around young folks who have lost a peer know that it's almost indescribable. I love the haiku form, and so I've got 2 haiku sequences in here. I'll go take my cue from the former James, dark to light. And I give praise to Matsuo Basho, one of the great haiku poets. This one is If Basho Buried Students. I visit their graves, and Bonsho's poem to his dead teacher drifts into my mind. At dear Basho's grave, pale, thin transients we pause, spring mist, sad pupil. I become Bonsho's negative, a sad teacher bullied by dead leaves. Blank pages litter my desk, and pencil shavings scatter like ashes. But being in a high school all day long is not all bad. Also, having your pages not marked is not a great thing either, but at least I'm good with filling in banter. Stuff was good. Thankfully, there's a table of contents that I mentioned I'm an English teacher. This is at Basho Taught High School. This is also why you shouldn't read from uncorrected proof. Let's just skip that one. Also, like the former James, here's a poem where I'm going to mangle some language that's not English. Several years ago, Immigration Services raided a chicken plant in rural Mississippi and to round up workers who may or may not have been in the country illegally. And since this is a family affair, I'll just call that stupid. This is Trabajar Tapone in Libertad. In Morton, Mississippi, 680 souls were arrested by immigrations and customs enforcement to keep America safe. To keep America safe, 1,360 brown hands were chrome cuffed and cattle led from the cramped factory floor into cramped unmarked vans, hands that hours before were still metal clad in chainmail gloves to protect the chicken thighs ripped from the machine's split carcasses. Children of some of the 680 workers stayed at school when the bell rang. Instead of seeing their parents, they were greeted with pizza and Pepsi and a safer America. To keep America safe, the plant lines stopped. The plucked corpses hung like ghosts. The factory floors are kept cold, but untended chicken is still unsafe. But to keep America safe, the poultry wasn't processed, wasn't moved into the ice bath and frost packing. Bacteria crossed the skin's porous border, injected itself into the meat, now rendered inedible, and incinerated, dusting the land with thin ashes, just to keep America safe. One more about Mississippi. One thing that I really enjoy about visiting North Carolina is y'all have these wonderful things, mountains. I think they're called. They're really fantastic. We got anthills in Mississippi. This is a poem about landscape and history for those uninformed. The northwestern corner of the state is often referred to as the Mississippi Delta, primarily agricultural, and also the spot of some really, really awful economic disparity. This is Delta. In scientific symbol speak, delta means change, but Here between Yazoo City and Memphis Delta means changeless. It's a pyramid built atop fertile soybean and cotton fields. The landscape itself needs no variation, no hills or dips, just flat acres of farms, roads, houses. Here, the hands that harvest aren't the same ones that count profits, just like it's always been. All right. One more Mississippi poem and then I'll wrap things up. This is $8.13 after taxes. And thanks to my friend Beth Ann Finley for writing something that gave me the idea for the form of this. Thanks, BA. This is $8.13 after taxes. 1. Public school teachers in Mississippi are paid on average $6,000 less than their counterparts in other southeastern states. 2. I have taught in Mississippi public schools for 19 years. 3. Governor Philip Bryant, R, Mississippi, served 2 4-year terms. 4. He signed 8 state budgets that included teacher salaries. 5. It is not uncommon for teachers to take on extra part-time work. 6. Once a week and the occasional weekend, I work at a local bookstore. That 7 sometimes involves off-site reading events. 8. Governor Philip Bryant, R, Mississippi, has published an illustrated memoir of his 8 years in the governor's mansion. 9. The mansion, a Greek revival structure built in 1842, cost $50,000 at the time. 10. In 2019, that total would be $1,343,207. 11. The book signing was held at the governor's mansion, which occupies a 2-acre plot in downtown Jackson. 12. When I arrived at the mansion in my dented Honda Civic with 4 boxes of Governor Bryant's memoir, the scrolled columns beckoned me to bow prostrate to their own alabaster magnificence as the guards did a perfunctory search of my car under the shade of the centuries-old tin oaks. 13. I unloaded the books myself. 14. The Mississippi Governor's Mansion, authored by Philip Bryant, R, Mississippi, costs $32.40 with tax. 15. I sold 27 copies. 16. $874.80. 17. Federal minimum wage is $7.25 an hour before taxes. 18. I worked 2.5 hours. 19. The event was catered. 20. I helped myself. 21. The brie was warm and silken and spread across my tongue like an aggressive kiss from a drunken lover. It was accompanied by blackberries the size of my thumb, sugary and tart, almost pregnant with flavor. The seeds tasted good after I dislodged them from my teeth. 22. After the event, I packed the remaining books myself into my car. 23. When I got home, I repaired a leaky shower faucet myself. $17 in supplies, about an hour in labor. 14. Governor Philip Bryant, R, Mississippi, having lived in government supplied housing, hasn't paid for home repairs in almost a decade. Phil's been back in the news recently, and I'm okay with that. All right. So wrapping this up, my wife and I have a really fantastic 13-year-old kid, and this is one that would embarrass him were he here. This is the naming of things. Horth right now means the rocking horse that you tilt yourself on while yelling, yeehaw! Later, it will be rocking horse, and later still old toy my grandparents gave me. After it spends time as rocking horse I used to have, it'll become a nice story at my funeral about me laughing as you pet its velvet muzzle or try to give it your pacifier. The oak rockers will dissolve into time, and the horse will become nostalgia and the innocence of boyhood. And when I was little, I had a horse like that too. But first, you've got to pull your tongue back, flatten it behind closed teeth. Let the flow around that embouchure like a rock in creek's ripples. My impossible desire for you to grow Clydesdale strong, smart and kind enough to eulogize me well, yet to remain diaper clad, trotting on the living room carpet, lisping wildly. It's great to be here, and it's great to meet Jim, Sara, and James. And it's I've always wanted to read at Malaprops. Malaprops, in my estimation, is the soul of Asheville, and it's a delight to be here. And those of you who aren't here, come to Asheville, come to Malaprops. I'm going to read from Gentle Slaughter, and since I don't know if I have more than one book in me, this book sort of contains everything. A lot of family stuff. Some ekphrastic poems about art and a variety. So the first poem, the only thing you need to know that you might not is North Greenville. I referenced that here. It's a college in South Carolina. And at the time, back in the 50s, it had a farm, and you could, the school got food from the farm, but students also were able to pay their tuition by working on the farm, as my father did. Exodus, and it has a epigraph by Derek Walcott from his poem In Italy. And the epigraph reads, "At dusk, the soul rocks in its homesickness." The 6 o'clock rattles the track behind North Greenville's college farm, blasts a cloud of crackles from the oak. Beneath the screaming parabola carved into dusk's yellow band, a freshman grips his knees, leans into the flank of his ward, a Guernsey stooping for grass. He warms his face against her steaming hide and imagines peaches hanging from his father's trees. The smudge pots belching dark into dark, his mother counting crates in the shed, rocking the arm of the adding machine, the harvest tumbling through the washer's hiss. He considers the sweet smell of juice seeping through a bruise, how distance is gauged by more than space, the mandatory call of wounded fruit. The next poem is called The Vicar, and the only reference there that you might not know, there's a town called Millette in South Carolina. It's about 20 miles from where I grew up, and it's a wide spot in the road, really. The Vicar. The trees are thick and dark near Millette, where Mr. Price milled his grain, where his dam organized the pond into a congregation of brim, not far from a bend in the river called Little Hell. To their children, the locals bequeath legends of whirlpools sucking down ski and bass boats. You would believe them too if you saw the currents colliding there, jostling for dominance like theories of evil, undercutting the banks, curling in lament. But beyond the cypress soaking their twisted roots rise legions of disciplined pines. Near the cabin where my father fled on Fridays to rest for Sundays, to escape the grinding politics of church, quiet pines swept the sky. Their needles ensured sanctuary by quilting the sun, forbidding other plants from taking root. Yet among them, a crippled maple grew in an open space, spreading its crooked limbs like the arms of Shiva, caught in mid-dance. When 12, I named it Vicar. And I liked it there, the silent competition of species, the absence of human drama, the liturgy of wind and wood. Last year I went back to Millette. The granary is mute. A hole in the silo welcomes winds and rain. The headstone over Mr. Price faces the river. At Little Hell, the currents still argue, their conflicts enduring longer than warring theologies and those who wield them. The vicar is standing but leans, bruised by time and loggers who came for the pine. Feral hogs have gnawed its roots in search of an easy meal.
Still, it grips the sandy soil as though it fears its next incarnation, the service to which its parts will be put. I will not see what happens next, but I wish it could know. I wish it will. Some of the local audience may know that my brother was the chancellor at Western Carolina University. He died in 2018. And while he was dealing with his illness, I wrote this poem. It's called Dead of Winter. We hardly noticed the sky on our walk from porch door to car, carrying small packages and leftover cheese from the last family Christmas with my brother. We know he will be dead this time next year and are wrapped tight as buds in that thought on our several trips to burden our trunks with boxes and bags, ignoring torn ribbons flailing in the wind. The cold stiffens our impulse to look down, to steel ourselves against seeing what still thrives. The sundog peering from the western sky, the laced geometry of veins lining the few unraked leaves that died in October. Crystals rimming the koi pond, and the orange blaze of fish, patient beneath the ice. Perhaps such beauty is no match for our present sorrow. Perhaps no beauties are. So we stare at our feet, hearing only their shuffle through frozen remnants of green, the dirty rags of snow. We're a real optimistic bunch here, aren't we? They don't get any lighter than that. That's amazing. This is a poem that is written after or in consideration of the poetry of Hayden Carruth, who is one of my favorite poems. And if I get a chance, I'll close with one of his poems. This is called Ode to the God of Dogs. 6 in the morning, the sun uncertain of its rise, this hound lying by my chair, her eyes and forehead lifting at my every shift. I yearn to say the words ontological and existential, the latter for the way it fills the mouth with sibilant grit, the former for the O's it spins on my tongue. Something essential is up and about, and praise, that infrequent guest, wraps her warm paw on the back porch door, wags her way into the light. Whether you exist is a question I choose not to ask today, nor will I button my well-worn sweater of doubt. These winter days, I sense you in the barren fields, in the unnameable gray of the coonhound's flank, the beagle's unnerving bay, the bloodhound's determined lunge at the end of the sheriff's leash. The grand chorus of howls at dawn fades like mercy and settles the house. O God of the hound, the Brittany, the chocolate lab, God of the pointer, the setter, and breeds less enamored of death, if others live in your pack, implore them to lean from their jealous table and look down on one man, aiming not for a place in their pantheon, but content in his woods by a herald stove, reddening in the heat from his last block of beach, a blue tick's chin on his boot. And the last one of my poems I want to read is has an epigraph by the essayist William Hazlitt. And the epigraph reads, "Without the aid of prejudice and custom, I should not be able to find my way across the room." William Hazlitt. The title of the poem is Lines Composed in the Jim Barkley Toyota Service Department Lounge. Just a couple of references. VIN, as everybody knows, is a vehicle identification number, but I'm just say VIN in here. I'll mention ESSO, and if you're not as old as I am, that's what used to be Exxon. True Blue is a cigarette. The bomb plan is a reference to the Savannah River Nuclear Facility in Barnwell, South Carolina, which is where I came from. And Browning is a reference to a shotgun brand. Lines composed in the Jim Barkley Service Department. That he smells like lilacs is the great surprise. This man in overalls complaining of gout. The reason he needs the clerk's help to find the Tacoma's VIN, but lilac is clear. Had all but olfactory sense been bound, gagged, and stuffed in a trunk, I would think a breeze had trailed a teenage girl through the sliding glass door, or that a woman my mother's age had shuffled to the seat backing mine to wait for the buzzer signal that her Camry was sporting new tires. But it is a man, a farmer by the looks of it, not long out of the beans. Beyond him, the lounge spreads like a surgery waiting room. Coffee, pretzels racked on the wall, camera balls in the ceiling tiles. Here, children have their own room. They slide plastic blocks along red wire, spiraling up from an 8x6 wooden base, a roller coaster diminished and slow. They finish their game of hangman on the board, insulated by fortified glass from the teenager professing his love for the yellow Camaro in the gently used lot, that vast plain of temptation. Prying a slab of caramel from his molars, he swears he'll find a way to pay. God damn it, Ma, I will. But I'm struck still by the man in his April scent. That and the segregation of the children, the cartoons on their big screen TV presumed more suitable than the weight loss infomercial spilling a buxom starlet into the lounge's expanse, and every man peeping over the edge of his car and driver to glimpse the blonde promising results and more in just 2 weeks. How different this is than standing by the icebox outside the service bay of Johnny Bessinger's Esso in 1971. Harold smoking his fifth true blue of a young Saturday. Harvey stuffing Redman into his cheek while stretching the truth about how many possums he'd shot at the dump. Murray raising the ante by comparing the new secretary at the zipper plant to Catherine Deneuve. And Johnny listening to it all from under the car, unscrewing the filter and draining burnt oil into the pan. The warm rush, slow drip. 2 years before Lou Gehrig's cocooned him in its tight suit. The smell was oil and grease, and talk was of the new lathe at the bomb plant, the way the Geiger counters seldom tick since March's steam release, the cracked valve. This, after all, was how boys then learned to be men. Osmosis and time. The segregations were simple, inherited. Lilacs belonged in gardens or wafting from Murray's wife as she led the pledge in the school day's opening prayer. But Johnny's gone. Murray and Harvey too. Harold watches shadows crawl close to his chair, dust mount the browning racked above the mantel, and all distinctions that once organized life blur. This life with fewer lines and uncertainty about who drew them. Boys who curse their mothers and mothers who take it. Children behind glass, men unafraid to smell like flowers, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I'd like to close, if I could, by reading a poem by Hayden Carruth, who is one of my favorites. And the strategy behind this is that if you like this poem a lot, and I hope you will, then you will somehow associate that with me, and therefore encourage the purchase of all of our books. Hayden Carruth died in about 2012. I actually sent him a copy of my chapbook just in gratitude, and you ought to read his poems. So I'll close with The Cows at Night. The moon was like a full cup tonight, too heavy, and sank in the mist soon after dark, leaving for light faint stars and the silver leaves of milkweed beside the road, gleaming before my car. Yet I like driving at night in summer and in Vermont, the brown road through the mist of mountain dark among farms so quiet, and the roadside willows opening out where I saw the cows. Always a shock to remember them there, those great breathings close in the dark. I stopped and took my flashlight to the pasture fence. They turned to me where they lay, sad and beautiful faces in the dark, and I counted them, 40 near and far in the pasture, turning to me, sad and beautiful like girls very long ago who were innocent, and sad because they were innocent, and beautiful because they were sad. I switched off my light, but I did not want to go, not yet, nor knew what to do if I should stay. For how in that great darkness could I explain anything at all? I stood by the fence, and then very gently it began to rain.